Good morning. Today is the 13th day of Sivan. Oops, I don't think we're ready. Good morning. Today is the 13th day of Sivan on the Jewish calendar, and we've been taking some steps, I guess in this past week or so, just been exploring a bit of what the Chabad community around the world is studying every day as we make our way through the book of Tanya, which we complete every year, studying a little bit every day, and we're now in the second section of that book. There are five sections or five books in the larger book, and that section is called Shar Hayichda Ve'amuna, the gateway of oneness, our unity, our pure monotheism, and faith. And the idea expressed is that monotheism from a Jewish perspective is not just believing in one God as opposed to two or three or seven. It's about believing in oneness in the world. That really there is no independent existence of God, which is hard for us to fathom in our normal mindset because there's so much around, and certainly it's real. And then we believe in God, but that seems to be even God as creator, or God is master of the universe, and all the greatness of God. But it's not that believing in God wouldn't seem to necessarily negate the believing in the independent existence of things other than God. And yet the Torah does tell us, and this is really founded in the Shema that we say every day, twice a day at least, is the idea of oneness. Hear, O Israel, listen, Jews, the Lord is our God, or the Lord is our life force. The Lord is one. One is not one as opposed to two, as much as one that is the oneness of reality. And I discussed, mentioned yesterday or the day before, that this is really reframed as we say that God gives life consistently to the world. And just as God's creative force is framed as being speech, and our speech communicates, expresses ourselves when we're speaking. Outside of us, there is an other. In other words, when I'm thinking, it's more personal communication. I'm speaking, but it's not like writing or drawing. It's something that takes my consistent input for my speech to continue. And the reason that the Torah, or a primary reason that the Torah frames God's creative force as speech, is to indicate to us that just as our speech needs consistent input, God's creative force is with consistent input. God did not create the world in the past. God has been creating the world and is creating the world at this very moment. That is Jewish faith, that as expressed over the millennia. Now, and developed in this section of Tanya. Now, looking at it that way and seeing that God is not distant, but God is really giving us our force. And therefore, if I look at an apple and I say, well, thank you, God, you created the apple. That could be that there's some God somewhere I can't see. And I believe that God created, whatever that means, God created the apple. This apple is a result of some godly creation. Perhaps in the 6 days of creation that God created apples, and now they're apple seeds. That's a normal, natural continuum. That now there's an apple because there were apples that were created in the beginning of creation. That's not the way we look at it. If I look at the apple, and it's red, and it has a specific taste, and it has a specific texture, my belief, the Torah belief, will be that this apple is created now. And not only is it created now, but just it's every element of its existence is a manifestation, an expression of a spiritual nuance in the creative force that gives it existence. And a way to frame it for our understanding, the way we are in our place in history, and the way we understand the world, given physics and science, whatever we've studied, there's an atomic structure, a molecular flow, however you want to frame it, something, or our DNA. There is beneath the surface of reality, there are dynamics that determine the reality we experience. Something A scientist will be here, not talking about God, not talking about spirituality necessarily. He'll explain to us why this apple is red and not green. Why this apple has a specific type of taste and not another specific taste. Why is it this texture and not a different texture that other apples will have? And they are all those physical realities are an outgrowth of a more subatomic or cellular reality that expresses itself through the apple I eat. I just think about an apple. Unless I'm a scientist, I'm not necessarily thinking about the underlying cause of what I have. But it doesn't come out of nowhere. There's a difference that one apple is different than another apple, and the difference lies in its core physical reality, physics reality. Metaphysics can be seen in the same way, and should be seen, I guess, in the same way, if we're going to use that model, that there is an underlying divine reality that creates the reality we experience. And that's invested in the world. It's not God distantly saying, yes, you're a creator. God is, just like my DNA is part of me, it is in me. I don't even know how you say it. It's what makes me me. There's a divine force that makes me me. I'm not even talking about myself, I'm talking about my body. And there's a divine force that makes this table and this computer it. Thinking about it that way, then the reality we see is really, and the reality of experience, the reality we struggle with, and the reality that may intimidate us, or the reality we love, is really, we're dealing with a reality that is a more surface outgrowth of a divine reality, of God and godliness. And therefore, the entire reality that we're dealing with is dependent on the divine. Because if that divine energy were taken away, there would be no reality for us to deal with. Imagine I said to you, I want to deal with you, but I want them to suck out your DNA, and then I'll just talk to you. Without your DNA, you're not you. There's no you. Without your atomic structure, there's no you. It's part and parcel. What I experience and what gives what I experience in you. If I was allowed to hug you, if it wasn't COVID, if I shake your hand, the you that I experience and what makes the you I experience is what? It's just different levels, different dimensions. There's the subatomic, the cellular, the atomic, whatever you want to call it, and then the hand that I'm holding. So there is, in looking at the world through the eyes of Torah, the eyes of Hasidic thought, the way it shows us what Torah is saying, is to look at the world where we are experiencing godliness in different manifestations. And our job is to be able to recognize that and see and bring out the godliness, bring out the oneness of the world we're experiencing, and to recognize that the world is not as independent as it seems. The world is as dependent on God as we are dependent on our atomic structure. And therefore, if you think about it, if there's, maybe to use a very shallow example, if there's a supervisor in your business, and that supervisor's authority is totally daily dependent on a different force, it's the supervisor is a supervisor, but you may take them a little less seriously because they don't have any intrinsic authority. It's very clear that the authority is coming directly and actively from a different source. They're barely a middleman. So looking at the world, the world is, God gave us the world. It's a world we have to tackle. We have to see it as valuable and important. At the same time, we see it in its context, and it's not as intimidating as it seems. It's just not independent as it seems. And there is a Hasidic expression, a Hasidic song that Hasidim will sing between themselves. And in the Yiddish, will say, everything is vanity of vanities, nothingness, because there is nothing outside of God. It's a hard thing to get your mind around. We'll pursue it a little bit more and try to develop the theology of it. If anyone feels that this is a little too cosmic for our conversations, feel free to tell me, because feedback is the key to being able to have adequate communication. Wish you a wonderful Shabbos, a dry Shabbos, and a safe Shabbos.